Okay, good morning, everybody. We're pleased to hear in this next session from Patrea Wilson. She is an adjunct at UMUC, teaching computer networking and cybersecurity. In talking with her before the conference, I assumed UMUC. I said, "You must be from Maryland." And she said, "No, I live in Alabama." And so that's part of the great thing about being part of UMUC Global Campus. And also learned that she doesn't have the intention to really move to Maryland because she does not like traffic and driving in traffic whatsoever. And with the cities back there, it's a bit different. So with that, I'm pleased to hand it over to Patrea.
Thank you, Adam. Good morning, everyone. I am excited to be here. I am jet lagged. Well, I'm going into jet lag, and I'm also reeling from last night. So what about last night? That was a great outing. And I also am just a little bit intimidated because I am following ethical hacking. So go figure. But I wanted to make sure that I put in a presentation that I thought that would benefit you as instructors and those of you who are in the academic arena. I created an acronym called R.O.A.R.R. And what I want to make sure that I do before I leave here today is encourage every one of you, instructors and your student population. I want to encourage you to certify. Forget about failure, forget about all of the misnomers that you've heard before. Make sure that you, in your writing of your notes, make sure you concentrate on the R.O.A.R.R. acronym and make it your own so that when you're encouraging students to do their work, to test and to employ, to gain employment, then they would have the courage and confidence to do so. So without further ado, I just wanted to again just bring this acronym to you the way I see it. And so right now we have a serious issue with education and certification being something like a competition. Theoretically, it isn't a competition, but with the agenda, hopefully we can unravel some things and make some things clear to you going forward, especially in your classrooms. And so education and degree we'll talk about one or the other or both, the advantages. We'll also talk about visualizing a certification path. We'll also talk about knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, identifying and knowing what those are. And then we will encourage practicing and so that your students and you as instructors can leap forward. And so going forward, here is the conundrum. And please excuse the lions. I could not find a lion that, that I liked, but in this particular case, this was a perfect example of what's going on in the classroom. In the classroom, we have our traditional student and we have our non-traditional student. The non-traditional student is what I'm going to really concentrate on today. The non-traditional student is that student that is coming back in the classroom after having worked in an industry. And so they're coming back for several reasons. They need to continue their education. They need to become relevant in whatever is going on in today's society. The non-traditional student also needs to keep their job. And so when we go back and we say, what's the deal? What's going on here? We want to encourage, and I always want to encourage education. It is never, ever, ever going to be an option for me. Students must get education regardless of what level they are in life. So if you're on the community college, technical college scene, or if you're on the university scene, make sure you encourage traditional learning. Also, certification. The issue with certification is this. We have a competition to where folks are coming out of industry or they're remaining in industry and they don't have time to get a degree today. They need to certify in order to keep their job. The interesting thing about this is that when they come into the collegiate environment, the collegiate environment is not short enough for them. They need an immediate solution and they need one now. And so how do we get them the immediate solution and still encourage degree? And that's the balance that we as instructors instructors and those of us in academic arenas will have to make sure that we balance on a daily basis, a continuing basis. And so again, encourage your students to get a degree, to complete their degree programs. That is most important. But in the meantime, make sure that they're able to capitalize on at least one certification while they're in the academic arena. So for instance, if you have a semester, and so you have students that are at different places in their semester. You notice that you have maybe 2 that are fast tracking. Allow those students to fast track, but encourage them to certify. And the reason why you want to do that is because it creates for them a clearer path as they're going forward. Meet the student, in other words, where they are. I didn't really want to spend too much time, but I really had to get those points out because certification and degrees are not competitions, they're complementary. And so make sure we kind of, fit that in, and we can ask questions about it a little bit later. And so going forward, we want to make sure that we start to look at the R.O.A.R.R, the actual acronym. And what I love about the R.O.A.R.R is that we have to realize is the first R, and we have to realize again that, we just said it, complementary, education and certifications are complementary. Well, how do we get there? An example would be this. So I have a student who is, again, he is, and this is a real life scenario. So I have a student who is coming out of the, just like your Microsoft example, the auto industry. This person did not really sell cars, but they wired the salesperson's business, networking wise, I mean. And so they had an interest in IT, so they started to come to the community college, and they were taking classes, not very motivated, but the student was very sharp. The student understood what they wanted to do and where they needed to go, but there was just some hesitancy there. And the hesitancy came from the book learning. And so students really know, a lot of them are hobbyists, they really know what they want to do. The problem is that they need direction. And so we can't be afraid to interfere in someone's lives and give them the direction that they need. So the person is here already in the academic setting, in the community college setting, getting the degree. The good news about the degree in this particular college is that it was an IT degree and a networking degree. So with a couple of networking courses at the end of their IT degree, they were able to dual major. And so that's what that community college centered on. But I found out in the classroom that this person really knew what they were doing. They made A's just naturally. They had a concept. They understood what it really meant to network computers, what it meant to communicate in a peer-to-peer environment. And so now certification talk starts to come in. We have to make sure that we have these conversations. Well, have you thought about certifying? Well, Ms. Wilson, why would I want to do that? Okay, let me show you a job announcement. The job announcement may say, nice to have A+, Net+, Sec+, or Security+, if you will. And we have to make sure that the person can see themselves as a certifier. And when they see themselves as a certifier, not just making the A's in the class, but when they see themselves as being a certifier, then you have that communication. You actually have that confidence built. The good thing about Test Out is this. You have, at the end of Test Out, many of you are stopping at the pro certification and the certification exam, the pro certification exam. At UMUC, we actually have the students take the practice certification exam, the real one, before they start the class. It gives them a gauge as to where they are. If they honestly take it, then you'll see 30s and 40s, which is a pretty good indicator that they went through the entire 2 hours, that they didn't stop in between, and that you can build on that particular percentage. You will also see in that practice exam certification at the end, beyond the pro exam, and I'm talking about the CompTIA one, whichever mode that you're using, you will also see students making a 3%. You'll also see students making a 4%, 6%. You'll see students, or you'll notice students opening and closing the exam. They're trying to make sure they get a feel for what it is that they are in for with their certifications. I make sure I discourage opening and closing. I see it, the first 5 students will always have a 3%. I will have to then put out as an instructor, this is how the exam works, because they didn't obviously read the instructions. When you open that certification exam, and I love it the way TestOut has it, every time you open it, it's different. And this is how it is in a real exam, a real certification exam. And so if you give yourself the 2 hours, or the students the 2 hours to take that at home, homework, or however you're going to assign that work, then they will have the confidence to say, okay, at the end of the course, or maybe even the middle, you'll start to see that they can take the certification course at any time and gauge themselves. So the 40% now is a 60%, which you love, right? And then if they can get a 70 or over at the end of the course, then they have positioned themselves. I'm talking about the student being diligent in what they're doing within TestOut. They'll position themselves by 70% to 90% to certify. TestOut does not tell you that a student can certify with just a 70%, but as an instructor, you will see those aptitudes show up. They say on these certification exams, 90% or better, and correct me if I'm wrong, 90% or better, and they're right. 90% or better, you're ready to certify, pay for a certification exam, a real one, and then make sure, and the students are successful. I've seen this time and time again, and the good news is that everything that TestOut has offered in their package beyond, especially beyond the pro, it works. Going into the O for R.O.A.R.R is observe. And please make sure you use the PowerPoints that I gave you. Write down your own R's, your O's, your own R.O.A.R.R acronym, and use it in your classroom. But in this particular slide, it's observe. The reason why I put observe here, and I gave you one of these certification roadmaps, the student has to see themselves going on a particular path. If a student is, let's just say they are a network pro, they love networking. Everything about networking, they just want to absorb it. Just to say a student coming into your class taking a networking exam or taking a networking course is not enough. Again, as you monitor the student, make sure that they can see themselves as a network professional. So here, it may be Network Pro that they are studying in your classroom. Remember, Network Pro translates in the real world to Network Plus, or it can translate to CCNA. But if the student doesn't see themselves on a networking pathway, then they're going to kind of get confused or discouraged somewhere along the way. And I love these roadmaps, and I just gave you this one so that I can make the point about this one. Make sure, if you don't already in your classrooms, join a membership or a website. CompTIA, I'm going to use this as an example. So I'm a member of CompTIA in my class. Students are using TestOut, they're doing very well. But as a member, I am able to get this particular roadmap in color. I'm able to then, they'll send it to me in a nice little rolled container. I'm able to look at all the posters and post them around my classroom. Many of you might say, well, I can't put anything up on my walls in my classroom. Well, put them up in your office. Because at some point, you're going to have to counsel your student. And when they come in, as they're waiting for their turn to be counseled by you, they can walk to the wall and they can begin to visualize their career. Oh, I see where PC Pro or A+ is going to take me. I don't think I need A+. And a lot of students will say that. They'll say, well, I don't need PC Pro. Let's just cut to the chase. Well, give them the opportunity to understand why they need A+. Remember, we're in a mobile environment, but the PC still exists. We just went into the business center. You still have desktops. So what about giving them a desktop and just letting them, teaching them how to assemble and disassemble, or point out components while you're teaching, or to reinforce what TestOut has already given you in their PDFs that are provided at the end of some of the lessons or all of the lessons. make sure they're able to identify the components. Just open the PC, give them a screwdriver, open it, and then let them take out or take out the memory component, take out the battery, take out the hard drive, the CD-ROM, et cetera, and those are some of the ways that you can get them to observe and visualize and to appreciate what it is that they are learning. And so, again, the O is for observe. The first one was for realize. Going a little bit further into the R.O.A.R.R acronym, we really have to be able to assess our strengths and weaknesses. I am a firm believer in, let me say this right, in failure. I don't encourage failure, but failure is a part of learning, right? And so I am not good at some things, and some things I have to just admit I'm just going to fail at, but it's not about the failure, it's about how you react to the failure and how you recover from the failure. And so in this particular slide, when we say assess, we want to make sure that we're talking about the student's weakness. Know your weaknesses. One way you can find out your weaknesses is if you do take the certification exams at the end. And remember, it gives you a printout on what domains you're strong in and what domains you're weak in. Make sure you concentrate on your weakest domains because they are going to be your primary assets to passing the exam the next time. One thing I noticed in the military scenario, in the military, I'm DOD, I'm federal, and DOD contractor, federal, and prior service, meaning that I served some time in the Army. And so what I noticed is that folks will automatically go take an exam. They'll pay $100, $200, $300 for an exam, and they'll fail it. They just want to get the anxiety out. Whatever their strategy is, they just want to get that out of the way so they'll kind of know what's on the exam. The good thing about Test Out is that you don't have to waste your money up front. Go to the certification exam in the back and practice and do as Test Out says. Do it until it's 90%. Don't shortchange yourselves or your students who are ready to actually take the certification. Make sure that they are using the tool properly. And if they use the tool properly, then the weaknesses become strengths and the strengths become certification. So we must be able to make sure that we use the A properly to assess, but make sure as instructors, we are not subject matter experts in everything either, although I'd like to admit that I am. I'm not. I am not the smartest person in the room half the time. You realize that folks come from different walks of life and they bring all kinds of experiences into your classroom. So make sure you assess them properly and you challenge them to do the right thing by the application and the materials that you're using in your classroom. Going forward to review, I don't know why I put Android stuff up there, but really I've really been to do Microsoft. I'm kind of upset with Microsoft right now. Don't tell the person that's here speaking for Microsoft, but I'm really upset with them because that 1805 or, the registry thing that they're having, it's just really weird how Microsoft gets you so far. And I'm not bashing Microsoft, I really like them. But here's a funny thing about versions. As you know, Test Out just said that they just did the PC Pro. They are always in line with the latest certification. I love that. Simple things make me happy. Not necessarily donuts or eclairs or robots. But simple things, attention to detail is what I really wanted to say. Attention to detail makes all the difference in your versioning. Because if you are on the verge, and this is what happens in academia some of the time, right now A+ has just gone or going to or about to go through or has gone to a new version. Some of the curriculum has to go over the version and before you get the new version, which is in the fall, you'll get the new version. Some institutions are like that. And so you can't continually chase certifications all the time because then there's a new book and then there's new. With Test Out, they've already done that for you. And the good news is they tell you up front, hey, this version is coming out. So you can kind of plan your classroom time or your new versions. Just remember, if a person is certifying, and this is what I just wanted to make sure I said in review, if a person, and with versions, if a person is certifying, remember that you must have the date of the, when that exam or that certification exam is going to really expire. Because theoretically, you can be on new content and still kind of have that layover with the older version of test. So make sure if someone signed up for it, they really don't have to rush, but they do have that industry drop dead date. And so you can kind of encourage them, but make sure you don't cross new material. Give them new material and then have them take an old exam. Just kind of be aware of that as you're encouraging folks to certify. But when we review, we just want to make sure that we are reviewing and we're understanding what the new content is. And you don't need to look at the entire book to find out what the new content is. All you need to do is go to an appendix and read it and say, okay, well, what's new from the old exam? And I love those because then you can start your teaching from what's new, and then you can just reiterate some other things a little bit later. So I just wanted to make sure I encourage you all with reviews, make sure that your students know how to read deadlines. They understand when Microsoft is going to stop making a version for Windows 7. That's important. They need to make sure they understand how the next version, if they even need to go to 2016, can they stay on 2012? That's the importance of exam versions, and I was referring to server in that particular instance. Moving on to, I'm on my last R. Can't believe it. So we've already talked about the R, the O, the A, the R again, and then the last R is reinforced skills. The interesting thing about practicing is, as I told you before, when folks finally figure out that they're about to lose their job, that they're under pressure to certify and they've never certified before, they have been immediately laid off and they need a quick solution for something, they really don't have time to reinforce any skills. However, in the classroom, you have all the time in the world within the 8-week, 4-week, 12-week, 16-week, 14-week period to reinforce skills. Reinforced skills should be a continuous thing. It shouldn't be waiting till you end up chapter 1. Assess your class. If your class is a quick study class and they're getting it, don't hold them back by being on chapter 1 when you could be on chapter 7. And so what I'm saying here is reinforce the skill. Allow a student who needs to go forward, and you monitor that student. Let's just say we have 3 here, 4 here, students that are just on top of everything, and then you have the other classroom who's kind of, average, and they're going along with the learning, and they're absorbing, but they're just not as quick. What I do with those students, these 4 here, is if they're too far ahead of the class, and some will, I'll let them get a little far ahead, but then I start using those folks as student teachers. I start dividing the classroom up, group 1, group 2, group 3, and then I'll make those folks group leaders. And then they will be able to glean on their peers. It'll be a good exchange for them. And I'm not the only one in the classroom giving instruction. Now they can trust their groupings. And then we have a little competition. So I'll give them job questions. Hey, instead of you fixing a computer one day, let's talk about this job. Here's a job description. Different job descriptions all over the classroom, and they begin to talk about that, but the person who is one of the quickest in the class is actually leading the discussion. And I challenge them. I actually tell them when they're wrong, or why didn't they think of this, and to kind of challenge it. And so I want you to understand that improve, learn, practice is a progressive thing and not necessarily a thing for perfection or to gain perfection. Make sure that if PC Pro is giving you those 3 to 5 to 10 questions at the end of a lesson, make sure they know that those questions just might help them on the certification exam at the end. And so encourage them to do those and do those right. What I love about that last test again, and I have to talk about the certification, and excuse me if I don't talk about the pro certification that you use for your final exams. We actually will go back at UMUC again in the undergraduate school, and that first exam is now their final exam, but it's not necessarily a final. They can take it any time they want throughout the classroom, and what we do find is that the scores do significantly improve if they give themselves the time time allotted to take that practice certification exam, and if they do right by themselves by doing the lessons throughout the 8 weeks. And so again, reinforce the skills. If they want to come in on I had Virginia College students who wanted to come in on a Friday. We didn't have class on Friday. If they wanted to come in on a Friday to do a boot camp, then of course I had to be there anyway. I would open up the lab and allow them to reinforce their skills in a boot camp scenario or just a practice, just giving them their own space. But again, we had students that's fast track. And so now you have a traditional student and a non-traditional student, or a fast track student or a non-fast track student. You pair them together and let them help each other to get to a certain extent. You'd be surprised how a non-traditional student will learn really quickly off of someone else, and then that person can share their experience with a younger student, and then the balance again is there. So don't be afraid to reinforce your skills going forward, and again, Test Out does that perfectly. Again, I just wanted to reiterate my R.O.A.R.R acronym. And so, again, make that acronym your acronym in the classroom. And I just wanted to make sure that I just say, realize, make sure that you understand the importance of education and certification. And remember, it is not a competition. For some people, certification is a survival. Make sure we observe, help the student to visualize their path, make sure that they can see where it is that they're going, and they can do that just by free resources coming from some of the vendors that you are using, like CompTIA or Microsoft. Make sure that we do the A, we assess our weaknesses. All of us know what our strengths are, and we always play to our strengths, but in certifications, you have to realize where you are weak, because then you can make that weakness your strength. Again, we go to review. Remember to check review exam versions, because if you don't check the versions, then you really don't know where it is that you're going to be standing, or where you're, how it is that you're going to progress in the server field, the networking field, or however, whichever track that you're teaching or your students feel that they would like to be a professional in. And last but not least, practice. Again, practice with simulation. That should be familiar to all of us with Test Out. They have great simulation. And I just wanted to say this really quickly. I don't think this is I didn't think I've heard it in the conference, but I personally have a problem with some students whose language is, English is a second language for them. And so I have not really figured out, and if you have any suggestions, I'd love to hear some of them, but I haven't figured out really how to start a student off in Test Out successfully. Writing papers is not a problem, but it is getting started in Test Out. I have a student, and I have this in several classes over my semesters, or over my 8 weeks, and I always see them on 0. Their labs are always on 0. I send them a note, and I'm almost tempted to kind of to reiterate what Test Out is doing, tape myself over and over, but there's got to be a better way. And so if you have those students, if I had that student personally, it wouldn't be a problem, because then I can position that student, physically work with that student, create a lab for that student, and have that student report to the lab. That's easy, right? But as an adjunct online, I have a challenge with that. So I just wanted to make sure I threw that out for those of you who may have some ideas. And again, identify and apply the scenarios, the pictures, and use keywords. Again, with visualization, we want to make sure that you can visualize some of the concepts that you're learning. I'm a big visual person, and so if my mind doesn't work as quickly as it used to, and so if I want to memorize something first, I probably have to see a picture, and then I have to associate a common word or something like that with the picture, and then, with me, it's just a step-by-step thing. But the students nowadays, especially those who, the millennials, or whatever we're tagging them now, they learn really quickly. And so we can't really bore them with lecture. We have to actually kind of mix the classroom up with all kinds of activities and things like that, which is pretty interesting, keeps us on our toes. But that's the good thing about Test Out. Test Out says, hey, you have the simulation. You have, I play some of the videos, and I want to thank Test Out for mixing up some of the folks our students were getting tired of seeing the same folks over and over and over. And then all of a sudden we had new people with the Office Pro, and it's like, yay! So thank you, we got over that. And so once we saw different people started to teach us different things with a new, fresh perspective, then the students were, you show it, and then you ask the questions on the materials that TestOut provides to you. And so you play a video, and then you ask the question, hey, well, what's RJ45? I know what RJ45 is. That's blah, 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 blah. Okay, what do you use it for? And then that's how you use it. Play another scenario. I don't bore them 60 minutes with it, but I can play I pick out a couple of important things that I want to hit out in the classroom, and I use TestOut like that. So again, the R.O.A.R.R acronym is yours. Make sure that you use it to encourage. Make sure that you use the R.O.A.R.R acronym to dispel fear. Students should leave your class confidently and courageously wanting to certify, begging you to certify. And remember, if you are a steward of vouchers, make sure you use your vouchers properly, and don't just give them out to students just because you have them, and don't hoard them away, keep them away from students just because you have them as well. Make sure that you understand that certification is important, and then make sure they know that they have 3 years to keep it up, and then give them the options for the CE on doing that. I'm not sure where I am on time. Am I good? Okay, and so again, I wanted to just talk to you a little bit really quickly before I take questions about the DoD. The job we always have these questions about folks getting jobs. Remember, there's a private sector, and then there's Department of Defense. You just have different types of job environments. And so what I wanted to make sure I understood, that you understand, is that it's not just about filling out a resume anymore and getting a job. As I was telling one of your TestOut over in the student employment, the interesting thing about the job announcements for cyber is, and you might agree with me, is they seem to be out of control. They write everything that could possibly happen in that job description. So when your student reads it, they can't see themselves in the job description at all. And that's amazing to me. I can't see myself in some of those job descriptions. But I'm here to tell you that when you read the job description, if it's something that you like, first find the highlight and find, like someone said earlier, just Google or search Indeed and do Network Plus if you have that certification. When you do that, then find a couple of things that you literally can do or that you've learned in your classroom, because your classroom is your experience as well. And so make sure you own it, and that's what I mean by the R.O.A.R.R. You have to have the confidence to say that you learned it and can apply it on the job if need be. So when you're reading a complicated job description, make sure that the student can see themselves doing it, inserting themselves into the actual job itself, not the entire job description, but some parts of it, and then cater their resume to that particular skill which they can bring to that particular job. One other thing I wanted to make sure I mention is security clearances. Some of the jobs have security clearances. You cannot walk into a job and automatically get a security clearance. You have to be vetted and cleared. You have to actually pass the interview before some companies pay for a security clearance for you. But make sure your students understand that when you apply for a cleared space job or a cleared job, that number one, they're not impossible. If you are selected for the job, they will provide you with the application to fill out and make sure they fill it out correctly. And the headhunter or the employer will help them do that. And then make sure that they understand that when they do, they are awarded a clearance or adjudicated a clearance, make sure that they understand that there are certain aspects that they have to do to keep it up. You have 10, 5 years, et cetera, et cetera. So make sure those jobs are not off limits to anyone. Anyone can apply for them, and then we do have some some criteria as well, but make sure they apply for those too, and that way they can get the full experience, the full weight of what it means to certify and to be employable in, let's say, DoD contracting spaces or even some private sectors. And I think that was it. Let's see what else I have. Yeah, this is the closest line that I can find that exudes courage. And again, this is just simply a recap. Make this acronym yours. It's not necessarily mine, it's just an idea that came off the top of my head. But encourage your students and your colleagues to do what? To roar. Thank you. And I'll take any questions that you have. I'll take any questions.
Do you have time for some questions?
Yeah, any questions? I'm glad there are not 50 people in here.
I actually just had a comment. If you do have students who are going for jobs that require security clearance, a lot of them you have to have an A+, Net Plus, or Security Plus to be 8570 compliant. When they do their application, tell them to be completely honest about everything in their life on that application. Even any kind of tickets they've had, even if they've had some discretions, possibly misdemeanor. If they are completely honest in the application, I've had students who I said, there's no way you're going to get clearance. And they were able to get clearance because everything was on there. If they omit anything, it looks like they're hiding and their clearance is denied, even if they look like they're clean. So that's just my comment when you're kind of helping your students out.
Thank you, and I'll just piggyback off of that. Remember, you don't put all that in your resume because your resume is supposed to be reflective of the job that you're applying for. But remember, when it does come down to doing the application security, and this is what the gentleman's talking about, the security clearance application starts with your name and all of your personal information, and then it does get into detail. Make sure, and that's if, in fact, they are bringing you on, and you get to that point. I think it's called EQUIP to be exact. The application is called EQUIP. So if you're asked to do an EQUIP, you're sent a link. Make sure, like he said, that you are answering those items properly and honestly. Next, please. Thank you.
And then you put your whole life in your 8670, whatever it is.
Yeah, 8570, and now it's 8140.
Yeah, whatever. But I was your non-English speakers. So I live in a non-English speaking house, and I have a couple stepdaughters who managed to take driver's ed classes that were English classes based in Spanish. So you can you can translate any app, any page, even test out, because they were doing videos, they were doing everything. From English to Spanish. So anything is possible, because I was amazed what you can do on the internet anymore. So if you have students that are struggling, you can translate any page into any language.
Okay, thank you.
So just encourage them, and most non-English speakers, they're aware of that. So
yeah, and it's like I said, when you have 8 weeks, and you're on the 4th week and your folks are on 0, then it's a panic issue. But what I'm looking for is consistency. And so thank you for that consistency. And as long as that consistency does not hold them up from, learning, as long as they're able to progress naturally with the remainder of the class, then I'm all for that. And I will look into that. Thank you so very much.
There is a plugin on Google Chrome.
I'm sorry.
There's a plugin on Google Chrome that's Google Translate that'll auto-translate pages.
Okay.
So that's something we've used at test out.
Thank you.
Sometimes it's not the best, but it works.
You mentioned your adjunct online.
Yes.
Those students that just don't seem engaged, seem discouraged, whatnot, you don't have that physical presence. What are some tools that you have used to be successful in that?
I hope everyone's heard, I'm an adjunct online, as I mentioned before. And so the good news about UMUC is they encourage interaction. We cannot not go any more than actually really 24 hours. I think they mean 24 hours, but we can't really go 2 days without having some kind of an interaction with our class. And so the good news is that even though I'm an IT person by nature, I'm always online anyway, so it's no problem for me to do discussion boards. It's no problem for me to email a student outside, using, and I'm just talking about traditional things, nothing fancy. I have been encouraged to, in email to finish my sentence, I have been encouraged to do YouTube videos. Folks they understand what I'm saying. They realize that when I said something about a job or certification, believe it or not, they're checking you to make sure that you're speaking truthfully. And so when they find out that you're telling them something specifically about their lives and they want to communicate with you, they want to see you. And so they were like, well, Miss Wilson, why don't you? I have a full-time job. Okay, hang on a second. And so it's up to you how much you want to delve into communication with your students. But the discussion boards are every day and a half to 2 days for me. The emails begin to get personal, especially when they're behind. Some students just don't communicate. One student wanted me to call and they said, Miss Wilson, I'm having a problem understanding what the demarc point is. Just a couple of weeks ago, the demarc point is, I just need you to, well, I explained it to him. He goes, I think I need you to call me. I said, okay, I work 10 hours a day, but I'm going to call you on such and such. And so, and we give them that attention as well. Nothing's really off limits. My phone number is not really off limits. My email address is not off limits either. So it's up to you and your comfort level. Thank you for the questions.
Hi, I just wanted to add to your comments because I'm an online adjunct as well. Okay. And communications or that engagement is important. And to your point, it is also important that they do see your face. Mm-hmm. So for the college that I work for, we're required to have discussions. We also have, and I talked about this in another session, what we have is virtual office hours that's dedicated for the students to come in. And during that time, we set an agenda because we found out that if there's no agenda, the students aren't attending. But if you set an agenda and talk to the assignments that's going to be taken for that week that they need to complete any type of quiz, you can cover it in that agenda, and then you find that you will get more participation. Email is great, but email often there's that loss of translation. And so picking up the telephone, having a Skype call or a chat call or some type of communication actually helps as well. The other thing I just wanted to applaud you on was talking about diversity in the classroom and that diverse learning, because it can be even more difficult in an online environment. But we found that when you start addressing the different students by identifying what their learning is, then that can help you prepare those students to be successful in that class. So I appreciate you highlighted that.
And I just want to piggyback off of the non-traditional student. I don't mean to beat this dead horse, but remember, if they are working in a military scenario, military meaning they're active duty or reserve, if they're working in a DoD environment, the pressure's on. If they have not certified, CompTIA did something that was very confusing to us. I'm one of them. Actually, I'm a survivor. But there are non-survivors that had a CompTIA certification that said they were good for life. And the sad thing about it is life means life, right? Well, it didn't. And so CompTIA went from good for life to CE. And when they went to CE, folks dropped off. If they weren't a part of an active DoD contracting scenario that kept up with their certifications, then you have a ton of federal service and a lot of folks who lost their certifications, and they could not enroll in a CE, a continuing education certification path. So make sure you understand that some people will come to you desperately. And I was just told, and if TestOut wants to go ahead and do this spiel, I just learned this morning that TestOut has a CE a module. And so if that's something that's going to be public or is already public, I didn't know about it till this morning. But that's what we need. We need for those folks who feel pressured, who need to certify or recertify right away, or to enroll in CEs to keep their jobs. We need to know that, and we need to be able to help them again inside of the time frame that that's given. Not necessarily the 12-week, 14 weeks, but some folks need an immediate solution now. And so that may be the solution for them using Test Out CE.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank
We'd like to
you.
give a big hand for Patrea Wilson.
Thank you.